Thank you. So as we move on to the afternoon, two panels, we're going to kick it off with a lot of discussion that's been talked about, digital, the aging workforce, and how that can sort of change. This panel entitled Leveraging Frontier Technologies and Information Platforms, High and Low Tech, which we'll hear about in a second. I'm going to introduce just our panelist here, who's been looking at digital water, has been in the water sector for a long time, probably seen more technologies in digital and water than anybody I know, certainly. Paul O'Callaghan is going to talk to us. He's the founder and chief executive officer of BlueTech Research, and one of our partners here at Science Water in the Columbia, who will talk a little bit about the digital. He has a few slides prepared, but I'll let you introduce the rest of your panel. I don't know if you want to start from there.
Perfect. No, thank you very much, Alex. So we'll begin maybe by introducing the panelists and then kind of frame this up in terms of what we're seeing happening at the moment and why the solutions represented on the panel are very relevant to that. So on our panel today, we have Matt Stuyvenberg from Badger Meter, who leads software development, water quality, looking at AMI, the use of intelligence across your platforms and beyond. Kim Nelson, I'm just going in the order I have them written down, Chief Operating Officer of True Elements. Jason Opferbeck, President of RAFA, provides data systems, equivalents of SCADA systems, and you can speak to that, David, for utilities. And David Mundie, CEO of High Tide Technologies, now part of Science Water Group. Could I invite maybe each of you to tell us a little bit about your role and what your company does, please, starting left to right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have been in business, I founded it 20 years ago with a goal to try to take high-tech telemetry and get it down to water system operators that just didn't have access to the technology for gathering real-time data. And so we were able to do that, and we've grown from them. But the problem with the operators is a lot of times the guy out in the field, in the truck, doesn't have access to the data of what's been historically happening at his infrastructure. And they need to know what's going on to make sure their system runs both within regulation as well as efficiency, water loss, all the things that they manage. So we provide a system that allows those guys to do that without spending a fortune on what what would normally been historically for doing that sort of thing.
Great. Matt Stuyvenberg, Vice President of Software and Water Quality at Badger Meter. Badger Meter's been around for 120 years almost now, so well-established Midwest, historically manufacturing company who would produce a meter for the purpose of generating a bill for a water utility. But really, as we've gone forward, changing more into a decision support company and now pulling back information from remote areas of the field connected to the water system to help make decisions and make water more visible. So not just about how much water now, but certainly water quality within the distribution network, within collection networks, out in the environment, high-frequency pressure monitoring, and really the culmination of all of those insights to help a utility better manage their assets, their operations, and then also connect with the homeowner and make water more visible to the homeowner and how they're consuming it. Do you have a leak on your property? And really that engagement on making water visible to operators, to homeowners, and really the nexus of how that data comes together to unlock additional insights and operational efficiencies.
I'm Jason Opferbeck, President of RAFA Systems. RAFA started about 7 years ago, and I started in the water wastewater world about 20 years ago as a water and wastewater operator. So I ended up designing and building my system, putting together a simplified SCADA system to an inexpensive simplified SCADA system that we couldn't afford the high dollar thing for the rural community that we were in. So I built that about 20 years ago, and then I was running about most of our county, and someone suggested to patent and move it forward and sell it, so we've done that, and we've grown into 16 different states now, and we got systems up and down the East Coast and some out west too. So just trying to work with small rural water systems and keep it simple.
Okay, great. I'm Kim Nelson. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for True Elements. I made a big career switch last year after 16 years at Microsoft and before that 26 years in government to join True Elements, a brand new company, as Chief Operating Officer. I joined the 3 co-founders. And True Elements is a water intelligence company. So if you listen to the panel before us, Shavonda and Sarah, they talked about really water intelligence to a large degree. So we define water intelligence as really this unique combination of using state-of-the-art technology, artificial intelligence, and analyses, scientific analyses, to aggregate large amounts of complex data, to process that data, and to turn it into really useful analyses and forecasts. And we do that so that decision makers can have the best information at their disposal and the best insights to make the decisions that will protect and preserve our water resources and run their businesses or their organizations or their governments.
Excellent, thank you very much. Well, look, as you can see, the title of our panel is Leveraging Frontier Technologies and Information Platforms. We heard a little bit today about NOAA and the information that they have, and USDA and how that impacts ag. And really, the technologies that we have represented here address all of that, both at the catchment level, which affects food production, but has a knock-on effect on water utilities. Hands up, how many people are aware of whether the Mississippi is at an all-time high or an all-time low at the moment? Yeah.
Low.
Yeah, very low. And that's having a massive impact on food transportation at harvest season at a time when it's critical to get produce out off the ground from the Midwest and out to port. And now, if we can have data that could potentially help us to predict and anticipate events like that, we can manage transportation of food, affecting the food chain much more effectively. The other extreme, of course, is that, in a month or two's time, that could change. And it can change quickly. And again, data, information platforms potentially allow us to anticipate those changes as well. And then respond. It's all about the decision-making piece. What decisions can you take that will protect your asset, optimize your asset? And that kind of will lead us into a set of problem statements that we're going to put out there and then have our panelists respond to those problem statements as to how they can be a potential solution to that. Then we'll look at the barriers that are holding us back. Why isn't this happening faster? And then maybe finally move on to what could reduce friction and realize more synergies and connection points between the companies that are represented here, investors like Cians, and utilities and end users. But before we do that, I'd like to maybe set the scene with a little bit of data. So BlueTech Research, as a data research organization, we track very closely these trends in where the money is going in the water sector into investment. Particularly relevant here is you'll see one of the highest areas for investment out of the areas we track. One is smart water, and that's what this information platform area represents, second only to ZLD and brine management. But we can also see data playing a role across some of the other investment themes, particularly decentralized systems and optimization of, for example, nutrient removal as well. If we look at the total number of investments that we've seen in the past 12-month period between now and this time last year, the highest number was into digital solutions by number. You will also see some money going into, for example, water quality monitoring, which ties back into this area as well. All of this shows there's a clear appetite among investors to create value by investing into digital platforms. Now, we've conducted surveys with the SWAN network, the Smart Water Area Network, of clients to determine what do they see as the top 3 concerns? What do they see as the barriers to adoption? And you'll see those listed there. Their key areas of concerns are things like managing the assets, infrastructure, asset management, also dealing with too much water, CSO events that can flood the sewers, it never even gets to the asset. You could have a state-of-the-art wastewater treatment plant ready to operate, but if it doesn't see the wastewater, it may as well not be there. And unfortunately, we could see utilities turning into disaster relief agencies rather than functioning utilities. This industry and this sector does very well when we, A, have water, and number 2, it's reasonably predictable. But if you take away both of those premises, it's an existential threat to the existence of the industry, or ability to create value. And that's what we see happening increasingly, but it's also where the opportunity for data information platforms exists to address those. But those are some of the things that the utilities are telling us keep them awake at night. And then they go on to the barriers. Why are you not adopting these solutions faster? Part of the answers is cost. We can't justify the investment, even though if you looked at it on a 5 or a 10-year or a 12 or a 15-year timeline, it would prolong the life of the asset, protect the asset, but it's difficult to make those economic cases. Another area is literacy. We talked about the aging, or we heard about that frightening statistic of, was it 57%? It's a big number of people who are going to be hitting the retirement age in the next number of years, and we see that across the board. And from the quiz earlier, we know that, was it 85% of those are male? Yeah, and only 15% are women. It was the other data point from that. But they're aging and they're going to retire, and that's a digital literacy problem. Lack of institutional knowledge, and also they cited that existing vendor solutions are not maybe meeting their needs or fit for purpose, maybe don't suit smaller utilities, maybe are more suitable to enterprise-wide utilities. So you can see the money's coming in. The value and the need for this is very acute. The value case is quite clear, and yet we do have some barriers. So I'd like to invite our panelists to comment now on, faced against that backdrop, how do you think what you're doing provides something unique and of value to addressing those challenges? David.
For us, in dealing with mostly smaller utilities, though they're growing, and even in a world of consolidation, the corporate operators still have small utilities that they're operating. They still are dealing with a community and individual treatment plants and things like that. There was an earlier panel talked about all the funding issues and where you're going to get that, how you're going to do the rate case. What these people need is predictable cost of ownership. And so they can plan a lot better if they don't have to go through huge hoops to get big loans or to get big grants if they can figure out how to do predictive cost of ownership. So the system that we've designed is predictable in what it's going to cost them. They know what it's going to cost them this year, next year, whatever. And so that helps them be able to maintain. So even with customers that you've been online for 20 years, they've been through a couple technology upgrades, but it hasn't broken the bank to move with the technology. So that's where I see that getting the data to the end user so he can make decisions or she can make decisions real time, and then making the systems predictably cost-wise.
And you're nimble, you've been able to do that, you've had experience doing that for utilities over some time now.
Yes.
Within Badger Meter, you know, the perception might be, Matt, that you're more suited to bigger utilities that can afford AMI, AMR, make those big enterprise-wide level investments. Can you provide that level of certainty, or how do you address this?
Absolutely, and I think that's really the key to everything we're going to talk about here is simplicity of solution as well, and focusing on what the customer's good at, right? So in our case, we made a big investment into cellular, and cellular data backhaul, of which the utility doesn't have to maintain their own network infrastructure to get that information back. And doing it in a manner of which it can scale from, if that utility has one customer, of which you want to put a radio on a meter, and you can do it at a reasonable price. It's not that you have an enterprise-wide license for access to that data. It is on a per-unit basis. So it scales from 1 meter all the way up to hundreds of thousands of meters to millions of meters. So from that standpoint, I think really making sure the utility can focus on what they're good at, treating water, delivering water to those customers, and then collecting it again and making sure we're being responsible with it, and taking that onus of how the data is going to get back and presenting that data in an impactful way in order to make decisions so that you're not spending your scarce resources, and especially as we talk about that retirement age issue, that's not expertise of people to be able to operate these networks. So making it simple, making it impactful, and absolutely scalable from the very small to the very large.
Okay, so we've got predictable cost of ownership. It's one thing people are looking for. Scalable from big to small, and take the data management off their hands. These are two key value propositions. Jason?
So what I think the biggest thing that we offer is, we said, the simplicity, and we talk about like the shortage of the workforce, and so like, and I know in our systems there, if you put SCADA or control in it and remote and immediate telemetry to talk and get your alarms, you have the capabilities of maybe a chemical feed pump or something will stop operating, and in the chlorine there you can get an alarm, and then has the ability to stop producing bad water rather than to try making up the difference for it. So giving operators the ability to have things happen automatically, so that the slower response time, especially like in rural America, like I know if the fire alarm goes off, it's key. Someone has to get down and turn the well pumps on. So now with the technology, now you can log in on your phone and turn the well pump on, or you can have certain things set into place to just take over and take care of it. So, in my municipality there, we actually ended up running 3 different water systems without adding any employees, because we had the ability to watch and take care of things remotely rather than they have to be there.
Okay. So that's the ease of being able to track and respond. If something happens and there is data or there is an information signal, it's what do you do, and you're making it easier for people to actually make an action, take an action.
Right, and with the SCADA system or the technology, it has the controls in place to automatically take care of certain things based on set points or different things to do it for you. It doesn't eliminate the need of the manpower to go down and do it, but it takes care of the short care notice.
Great, thanks Jason. And Kim?
Yeah. So, we've heard a lot of conversation this morning and throughout the day. And again, Shavonda earlier talked about artificial intelligence. Matt, you talked about it's got to be easy to use, right? So to a large degree, that's what we're able to do, is take really lots and lots of data that is so hard for people to find and discover and interpret and use, and provide the analysis that makes it easier for them to understand. And one way I would say is, we're looking at a very unpredictable future. Sarah said, we can do a whole lot better with the weather than we can do the economy, and that's probably true. But even as we look to the future, the weather is uncertain, right, in terms of what's happening with climate change. NOAA put out this report last week. I brought this as a prop, but U.S. eclipses the record for billion-dollar disasters, right? So with the latest hurricane, we eclipsed $1 billion worth of damage this year. First time ever, and it happened in September, and there's still 4 more months of the year to go. So what could we do? We could all work better together to provide forecasts for what those risks are. There's been talk about there's operational risks, there are physical risks, right? There's reputational risks to any of these utility companies if they can't deliver the services that people expect them to deliver in a reliable way, having both enough water and quality water. So I think that's one of the ways we can bring state-of-the-art technology, artificial intelligence, machine learning to the table to help with those decision makers and do the forecasts.
Okay. And I think one of the things we're seeing is greater levels of partnership and integration between digital solutions. Oftentimes people talk about interoperability challenges, that one system, one dashboard doesn't talk to the next dashboard, and utilities say they get dashboard fatigue, that everyone's trying to sell them another dashboard. And sometimes they want one solution, or sometimes they just want the best solution. It's a key area that, when we are tracking this and going to customers, we're trying to determine whether or not you need to have a different solution for, say, Chicago MWRD. It's a rather different utility than the 4,000 utilities in Louisiana that we heard about. And, does one size fit all? And how do companies scale? I see 2 smaller companies that I think have found a niche in the market. That's my observation. I see Badger Meter that could probably go up and down the value chain, actually, quite well. And I see groups like Science who are buying up some of these smaller companies to create value for the utility portfolio that they have. And then Kim's company, True Elements, sits kind of 1 tier above all of that, at the level of the catchment. And it's that connection point between and partnering between different companies that we're seeing more and more of, and that could reduce the friction potentially to adoption. But I'd like to introduce a few problems, hypothetical ones, and let's think through how these type of solutions could help address them. Maybe a few examples from around the world that we're seeing as well, where people are using digital twins, data to good effect. So Melbourne Water, for example, can now predict 2 days out whether or not the reuse quality water will decline based on data models and algorithms that study the plant. So they can give a farmer the heads up, yeah, look, expect there's going to be a decline in 2 days' time, which allows the farmer to make an informed decision on, you know, to be aware of how to deal with that on the land, might clog up the irrigation system. If we take a scenario where, let's paint a picture, there is going to be a very extreme rainfall event. NOAA have predicted it. It's coming next Sunday. It's going to cause turbidity spikes in a river. That's going to affect a drinking water treatment plant. There's going to be a boil water advisory because the chlorination system won't work and the UV lamps will have no chance of getting through that turbidity spike. The biology in the wastewater treatment plant is going to be completely washed out. So the nitrification bacteria are gone, and they're going to be breaching discharge consent because their clarifiers won't work. And that's a realistic possibility. It happens all the time. Could I ask each of you, have you come across situations like this, or how do you think you could help anybody in a situation like that? Because it's leveraging those platforms to deal with those real-life challenges is what I think is the nub of it.
Yeah, I'll take a crack at that. I think you touched on a perfect example. And it's fair for people to say, there are too many different places for me to go or too many dashboards for me to look at. I don't have the time to look at all of those, nor do I have the ability to look at them and sort of real time bring them together and make sense out of them. So, you know, to the exact example you provided, you know, the capability exists today when you integrate vast amount of data to know, here's a current surface water body. We know what the quality of it is generally, day to day, on a normal day, a beautiful day like today. We can take NOAA data, just like Sarah talked about. We can take the NOAA data. We can aggregate that data with a prediction that says 3 days from now, there will be a very significant storm, as compared to a little drizzle. Like, the weather was yesterday morning when I got off the train, you know, coming down pretty hard. Well, that kind of rain is going to create significant stormwater runoff and agriculture runoff. And if you combine the topography with the surface water, with the crops and the pesticides and herbicides that are on those crops, now all of a sudden you can start to predict a storm's going to come in 3 days. It's going to be a really heavy storm. And not only are you going to have stormwater runoff, but you may, for a water source, have a significant amount of phosphorus and nitrogen that all goes into a surface water that you're relying on for manufacturing process, maybe where you need really clean water. So we can do those predictions today. That's not something, you know, it's going to be available a year from now, 2 years from now. It's available today. And that could help a lot of people. It saves money on how the water has to be treated. It might save money on terms of bad products that get produced, but all kinds of ways to save time and resources using good information for insights.
Not to jump on what she's saying, but like we had a 500-year storm event that happened with us, and having the data along with it to maybe stop and turn off our plants, our water plants, instead of filling them with all the sludge and stuff that came from the washouts would have been a huge help. One of the other things that we do as a company is we partnered with National Rural Water Association, who has a multiple, I think 260 some circuit riders across the country who goes around and helps small utilities. And we developed a product called Aqua Hero, which is basically a portable, simple SCADA unit. So the last hurricane that hit in Florida, in Suwannee and Cedar Key, right after the storm, they took our portable case and hooked it up to their sewer pump stations. We were able to get them restored in just a matter of a couple hours. And so that was nice that we have that there. We've also supplied 6 states down south with all of them, so the circuit riders actually carry these units in their car in case of emergency. It wouldn't just be for like, you know, maybe a hurricane. It could be for a lightning strike where they lose communications or something. They can set communications back up in minutes rather than waiting to order something or trying to get something. The lead times are are kind of rough these days. So these guys, the circuit riders, there's 6 units in Florida, and there's several in Georgia and Louisiana and Mississippi, and pretty much the whole hurricane area we have these units riding around, and we're spending as much time as we can training the circuit riders so they understand how to use it and get people up and going. So it was nice in both those cases. The wastewater treatment plants or the main pump stations were 6 feet underwater, and shortly after, within 2 hours after the water receded, they had our system there actually up and running the pump stations for both Suwannee and Cedar Key down in Florida.
I think just in general, the ability to get data out of silos and leverage it for other purposes is huge, right? So even the comment about NOAA and what True Elements is doing, having that data accessible so that models can be built around it. Having data that from a distribution network of which I can leverage to even inform those models better, because without ground truth of what's going on, at the end consumer, I can't predict a successful model from how that river water quality or groundwater quality materialized into water of which happens in a building. And some of that is incredibly hard to do if I'm relying on coarse granular data of a water sample collection of which is going to take 6 months to get back. So connecting, some of the online sensor communities back to data models to be able to leverage and validate and have ground truth for how water interacts with each other. We've talked about it plenty here, right? It's one cycle. It is not separate portions of water, but making that use case for why someone may have purchased that sensor, that data package in a very small point, right? For RAFA, someone's buying your systems to operate something. But can that data that's generating also be used somewhere else? And I think that's the exciting part about where we're at with cloud platforms, where we're at with APIs, data interoperability, that we can really start to extract more value from the data that has historically been collected in silos within various portions. And whether that's a formal partnership or just data and accessibility and people not being so protective over what otherwise may have been seen as, well, I don't want someone to see what's going on in my utility or in my river or wherever else. It's public now. People have tools to see this day in, day out. And I think the push is going to be around more data visibility, more visibility around water.
Yeah, this example is the water quality coming into the plant and what they're going to do with it. But they also have rain events and stuff affect the wastewater systems when they have a lot of I&I or problems with overflows with too much water, or power outages that may be associated with storms. So we've been able to overlay NOAA data on so they can see, okay, this tornado watch, this storm watch, this whatever, and actually graphically overlay it where their system is so they can predict, okay, we need to have generators in this area, we need to have, be prepared for when we have these power outages, because when the sewer lift station loses power, the sewer doesn't stop coming. It actually comes faster because of the rain inflow. But it also can correlate, all right, we had a 3-inch rain event that created this much extra water into the plant. So if they look at the historical data that they have just in their own system, then they can start planning maintenance. Okay, this area we really need to find that inflow problem. We really need to fix it so that we don't have these overflow events, which we have to report to the EPA and every time it happens. And so, again, the data is critical to the individual, but also to the corporate level and above to plan the allocation of their resources for these things.
Vic, do you think it'll help with more efficient use of capital? We often hear the challenge with they might know that. They may know that this should happen, but it's then raising however many tens of millions of dollars may be required to make the investment to make a change to the system, because there's always an interface with the physical system, the analog system, at some point in time. And whether you get the information that tells you need to shut down the pump station or switch on extra chemical dosing or bring in an auxiliary treatment unit, there's an interface with something tangible at some instance. And sometimes that will require an investment into diversion, storage, blue-green. And if we look at the barriers and what can reduce it, how do you think we can make a better economic investment case
Well, the key is to understanding the cost of not doing anything. And so once you get that side of the formula, then you can predict, all right, if I make this investment, this is my return on investment. So in the next 5 years, I will save this much in maintenance, I'll save this much in pump replacements, I'll save this much in cleanup. And so you can make the tangible effort, but a lot of times the individual small utilities don't have the resources even to make that kind of financial analysis because they're dealing with the day-to-day today. And so providing resources that help them have that information and then give them information so they can use it to justify grants and proposals and stuff. Because I know for a fact that if a treatment plant is running out of capacity, and they go ask for a grant, the first thing that the granting agency wants to know is their water loss.
Right.
And so if you don't fix your water loss, why should I give you money to increase your capacity by 40% when you could reduce your water loss by 30% and delay that investment? And so these kind of tools, this data, helps them figure out, are we coming down on water loss? Are we reducing our number of overflows and things like that?
And I think that's where a lot of what we're up here about is really on, making that visible. You can't manage what you aren't measuring, and if you don't have access and visibility to it, it's really hard to build those cases for what I need to invest in without being really data driven. And we've had clients of whom source water monitoring down rivers, and they were having nitrate issues on finished water. And it was exactly what you talk about, Kim. It was rain events in the spring of which was causing this to occur. And the first step in the problem was just monitoring 7, 14, and 21 miles upstream to get a heads up on the issue. But long term, it was building the rate case, building the justification to put in appropriate treatment to fix the problem. And I think even bigger picture, it's how do we manage water surface flows to make sure that we don't get into those situations in the first place. But without the data, without the insights, it's really hard to make those informed decisions. And like you said, even non-revenue water, how do you go and justify taking more if I can't even account for what I've got spilling out of my pipes or anywhere else?
So, with all the talk today about the Infrastructure Act and the bill, the bipartisan infrastructure law, and other legislation that was passed to invest in infrastructure, there wasn't any talk about more sensors and more real-time data. And that's very disappointing, because it's like we're living in a world of, two data worlds here. One, I talked about so much data, but on the other hand, we don't have nearly enough. And you touched on it, Matt, a couple times. Some of the data sources we're using, just so you know, in the federal government, there are about 30 different agencies with water data. A couple people this morning mentioned we might need a Department of Water. I mean, people talk about that because there are over 30 different federal agencies that have water data and that have some other water function. Close to 60 different systems, almost 600 different data types coming out of the federal government. But some of it's old, some of it's once a year, some of it's once a month, some of it you get 6 months later. If we really want to be able to create the insights and give people the best possible decisions making ability, we need more real-time sensors out there. There's 1.5 million between NOAA and USGS, and they're getting cheaper, and more people are putting them in, but we don't have access to them. So I would love to see the government invest in a true network of real-time sensors out there, all connected to the internet on a real-time basis.
Well, I think a game changer will be Earth observation science, in that satellite that NASA launched, SWOT, Surface Water Ocean Topography, it only launched last November. That is, to my mind, one of the most disruptive things I've seen happening in the water sector, because it's going to democratize the data. Anyone can get their hands on it. It gives you in real time for free, and it'll give you quality, quantity. And I think this is an interesting thing we're seeing happening with data. You mentioned the empowering part of it, but also it's going into the hands of the actual end user in the utility. Johnny from Simple Labs this morning was telling us that they're getting an unprecedented demand for sampling for PFAS in drinking water from consumers who want to know what's in their water. At a household level, I installed a device in my own home called a Fin, but there are variations on it. It tells me exactly how much water my dishwasher is using, my tumble drain, my washing machine, my showers, my bathtubs, his toilets. And the minute you have that data on an app, you suddenly become connected and aware of how much you're using. And then even at another level up, we're seeing examples in Australia and the UK where they take rainwater tanks, and one of the themes for this panel was high-tech and low-tech. So we're seeing examples where you take a rainwater harvesting tank on the roof of your home, which is low-tech. That's pretty simple. It doesn't get much simpler than that. But you connect it using digital technology to be distributed attenuated stormwater storage so that every one of those butts at the end of a rain pipe is essentially a stormwater holding tank. A bit like the Tesla battery, grid analogy for water. But then you can use IoT data. And now the householder and the homeowner is now somehow a participant as well in the conversation. Now, the minute they're a participant in it, surely they're at least aware of the fact that they could have a stormwater, a CSO event, and by involving them at a visceral level, I would think, can hope to get them involved in a discussion around funding, a discussion around investment, a discussion around rates. So, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that kind of whole democratization and participation of this.
So I guess I'll start here, but it blows me away the fact that our relationship with the water utility is still on generally a quarterly basis in the US, of which we get a bill that is presented to us in the manner of how much we've consumed that quarter. AMI is not new, and certainly I'm a little biased, but we've had consumer outreach apps now for the better part of 10 years, and it's just not well adopted. And the ability to have devices like Fin or Flow or any number of other devices you can hook up from a consumer level, but really I view the water meter should be doing much more than just generating a bill. It should be that outreach to the homeowner. We can present now 15-minute data. We can give you leak notifications of what's going on in your house. Our CEO just realized he left his hose bib on at his other house this weekend because he got a notification from our Ion Water app. I mean, that would have been hundreds of thousands of gallons of water by the time he got back to his home in 2 weeks, of which he got notified and could curtail that. I mean, there are any number of examples of empowering homeowners with information about their water, whether it's Johnny at Simple Lab and water quality data, consumptive use data, even irrigation warnings. We have to have a tighter relationship with our homeowners and making water more personal to them.
Yeah. Well, Matt, to make it even worse, under federal law, water utilities only are required to inform you about the quality of your drinking water once a year. Once a year. And that's the quality of the water when it leaves the treatment plant. All things happen between the time it leaves the treatment plant and it comes out of your spigot, your faucet. So there are wonderful new technologies now that put it in the hands of consumers, to your point, that allow a consumer to check their water quality coming right out of their faucet. And that's what we're going to get to. Sampling, and we're still at a point where samples at labs are too expensive. Whether they're volunteers out there trying to take samples of streams and trying to understand PFAS, those kinds of samples that have to go to a lab are way too expensive. We need to reduce this again, getting back to putting good information in the hands of people sooner for less money. And there's new technology doing that today.
Good. Well, I think we'll draw to a close there at that point. Hopefully you're enthused by the possibilities and realize that there is opportunity to create value. There are also unforeseen consequences of all this data. I have that Fin device in my own home. I can now tell when my kids are watching movies late at night and they're turning on the tap and using water and all sorts of stuff. There's probably some law against me monitoring them like that. But that data and water use has been very personally empowering and it influences decisions. So I think it goes right through the value chain, right from the NOAA level right down to the household level. So thank you, everybody. Thanks to the panelists. Thank you. Thank you.